If you're an Optus customer this afternoon, you'd be absolutely fuming, and with good reason. It's been 5 days since we learned about the cyber attack that saw the telco giant lose the private information of almost 10 million Australian customers. This morning, we saw an anonymous account posting on the dark web blackmail Optus, threatening to release the information unless they're paid $1 million US. And then we saw a post from the same account apologising for the hack. And it's left most of us wondering what the hell is going on and how does something like this happen in the first place? Senator James Paterson is the Shadow Minister for Cybersecurity and he joins me on the line from Canberra. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
What does this hack say about the security or lack of it when it comes to a telco giant like Optus?
It's frankly not good enough. Optus is one of our largest telecommunications providers and should have among the most sophisticated cyber defences of any company in the country. They hold incredibly sensitive personal information on all of their users, and they should be very well equipped to prevent exports of data like this, and that they haven't been able to do so in this instance is incredibly concerning and disappointing. And my heart just goes out to those Optus users, particularly any of those who might be among those 10,000 names released today, because unfortunately you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Now that those names and information is out there, those people are vulnerable to identity theft.
Do companies like Optus need to have information like passports, licence numbers, Medicare details in the first place?
They may need it initially to verify the identity of someone who is opening an account, but it is not clear to me that they need to continue to store it, and certainly not that they should do so for 5 or more years, as it appears to be in some cases here. I think all of these companies need to think very carefully, do they actually need this data? And if they do, then it should be stored in the most secure, encrypted and password-protected way, and it is not clear in the case of our Optus that it was.
Well, certainly if a company like Optus gets this information, I mean, why does it need to hold it? I mean, when you think about it, our data is a sitting duck.
That's exactly right, Jim. Data is actually, although a very valuable thing, also a very dangerous thing. And the more of it that you have and the more detailed it is, the more interest it is to potential hackers. And so you've got a really important responsibility as a company if you are choosing to hold this data to take every possible step to protect that data, because that's a compact, that's a trusted relationship that you've entered into with your customers. And Optus customers are absolutely entitled to be furious. Imagine if you're someone who wasn't with Optus anymore, who had an account 5 or more years ago, who's just been exposed in this attack. I mean, those people are particularly right to be angry today.
Well, you've got former customers and stories of former customers who have been compromised, personal details, including their passport numbers, licence details. I mean, it's just not good enough.
It's absolutely not good enough. Home addresses, and if the reports in the media this morning are correct, also Medicare numbers, that is incredibly troubling because it is not clear that Optus has ever previously disclosed that Medicare numbers were part of the data breach. They specified exactly what was leaked initially last week, and it appears that they weren't being upfront or they didn't even know what data had been breached. And if that's the case, then it is not just the initial hack that is the problem, but the way in which they've handled it since.
I'm chatting to the Shadow Federal Minister for Cybersecurity, Senator James Paterson. Senator, what type of government intervention should we expect to see in the fallout to this very serious cybersecurity breach?
Well, that's a very good question, and it will be up to the government and the Minister for Home Affairs, Claire O'Neill, to specify exactly what they have in mind. And the opposition's starting point is we will be bipartisan and we will offer support to any sensible reforms that will help prevent things like this happening again in the future, or if they do unfortunately happen again in the future, that they mitigate the consequences of doing so. There's a lot of things we could do around the storage of data in these companies, requiring them to delete it after a reasonable amount of time if they don't need to continue to hold it. We could have tougher penalties for them if these breaches do occur, and we could require them to effectively meet the costs and bear the consequences if this data is leaked. Optus has already offered to fund Equifax subscription on behalf of the affected users, which effectively is a monitoring service to let you know if someone's trying to take out a loan in your name, for example. Well, maybe that needs to be a requirement of the law in the future, and I think that might change the way some of these companies approach it.
What else should Optus do to compensate the millions of customers who've been hacked?
Well, I think they need to have a very big, deep pockets and a very open checkbook, because unfortunately some of these users could be subject to identity theft, which costs them serious amounts of money and puts them in financial peril. And if that happens, then I think certainly morally, if not legally, Optus is responsible and should consider how they help make those people whole and protect them from those attacks. And the reality is, now that this data is out there, in some cases, these are attacks that could happen for years and years to come. There will never be a time when that data can be retrieved from the internet, unfortunately.
You see, I think they need to offer 6 months' worth of free service to all affected customers. What do you think?
I think that's a very good starting point, and I think that would be a very wise business decision, because otherwise I think Optus is going to lose a lot of these customers, because they will have seen their protections of their data to be totally inadequate.
It's a long road back, isn't it, to recover from this?
I think it is, and I'm particularly concerned by the disagreement between the federal government and Optus today about the nature of the attack. The Minister O'Neill has said it was a very basic attack, and Optus continues to maintain it was a very sophisticated attack. It is often the case when there is a cyber attack that the CEO of a company runs out and says it was very sophisticated, as if that protects them from responsibility. But it is almost always the case that these compromises are in fact not sophisticated at all and very basic. And we really need to establish the facts here to understand whether Optus is telling the truth or whether the federal government is telling the truth. And, if I had to guess, I would say I'd much more likely side with the government than Optus at this point.
So you think it was a basic attack?
That is all the indicators that I've seen in the public sphere. There will be classified material that the Minister will be aware of and is at liberty to reveal if she believes it's in the national interest.
See, I think they've handled this terribly. They haven't communicated properly with customers. I believe that heads should roll at Optus, and surely the CEO must be under enormous pressure to remain in the role, Senator.
Well, the CEO went on radio this morning and accused the Minister of misinformation and said that the data was both encrypted and password protected. Now, if those statements turn out to be false, then I really think there is only one option left for the CEO.
That it has to depart the building.
Very clearly.
Yeah. Thank you for your time this afternoon, Senator.
Thanks, Jim.